Why a realistic price is crucial in today's market. Hi, my name is Manny Ortega. I'm a realtor here in St. Augustine, Florida, and today we're going to dive into the topic of why it's so important to price your home correctly in today's environment. If you decide to sell your house and you say, you know what, I'm going to list it at a pretty high price because my house is worth it. Okay, fine, that's great. But just understand that nowadays customers are very informed, right? With the internet being out there, with Zillow being out there, and a bunch of other realtor websites or real estate websites, you're gonna be able to be picked out between the pack, right? So if you decide to sell your house and list it at a high price, it's very easy nowadays for a realtor, hopefully, who's batting and representing a buyer, or the buyers themselves, to quickly go online and check your house to a very comparable home, especially when you live on these subdivisions that they're sort of like, not cookie cutter, but you know, they got the McMansions and like they're sort of built around the same time, and they can easily shop around in that same subdivision, or even worse, sometimes you'll see a subdivision being like a resale home being sold, and yet they're not even done, you know, constructing new houses in the back. And so like a buyer who comes in, he's like, I could get a brand new house, and they're comparing that brand new house to your house. A lot of times, if you fall into the trap of listing it high, it's so easy for a buyer to dismiss you because you're not being realistic about the price, because they can easily see what the market is going for. So I just want to emphasize, so as a seller, if you decide to list your house at a high price, well, this is the thing. The house goes to the highest bidder. And if the highest bidder is you because you're saying that it's worth that much, then congratulations, you won the house. You bought the house, you stayed with the house. And so I just want to emphasize that you got to be realistic. You got to put yourself in the buyer's shoes when you go to list your house. So this is why we emphasize and we go back to motivation. Are you really trying to sell your house, or are you just trying to throw it out there to see how much you can get for the house? If you're really trying to sell the house, then be realistic about the price. If you're not, and you're kind of like, I wonder what my house is worth, let me see what kind of traction I can get, then do yourself a favor, just get a CMA, have a realtor do a CMA or do an appraisal, and then you waste a lot of headaches and frustration later on if you're not being serious about selling your house. I don't mean to be rude or mean when I say that, but you just gotta have to be realistic about selling your house. You really gotta price it at fair market value. And when I say fair market value, what I really mean is, obviously I'm factoring any upgrades that you've made in the house. I'm factoring in the fact that, or most, I should say your realtor is factoring all these different things to adjust the price according to all the upgrades you've made in the house, the lot that it sits on, the view, etc. Okay, so when I say that, pricing it correctly, I'm factoring all those things as well. This is why it's so important to do a CMA before going live in your house. A CMA is a comparative market analysis that your realtor will do for you to give you a sense of what the market is calling for. And what they'll do is they'll look at the recently sold homes in your area, and they'll compare your house and any upgrades that you've made, any upgrades that a competitor has made and that you haven't made, and they'll adjust your house's value based on what they're seeing on recently sold homes. Armed with this information, the CMA, buyers and sellers can now go to the market and understand whether or not they're gonna pay too much for a house, or if they're listing it too high or even too low. Here's what happens when you overprice your home, okay? So what tends to happen is, like any other market, the real estate market is a factor of supply and demand. Understanding supply and demand is crucial to making sure that you get the best return on your home. Okay, at the macro level, the overall residential real estate market exhibits a typical supply and demand curve, like I said earlier. First, the supply of homes. The supply of homes available for sale is influenced by factors like construction rates, homeowner sentiments, and mortgage rates, just to name a few. Once your home is listed, it becomes part of an aggregate supply of homes, of which typically there are close substitutes that are readily available. Like I said earlier, for example, that your house is in a subdivision that is very comparable to another home that is like a few doors down or on the next block on the other side. This means that buyers can quickly shop around for similar types homes. On the other side is demand. Demand is typically driven by factors like household formation, economic conditions, and consumer confidence. Things like inflation and interest rates obviously play a big factor when it comes to the demand side. We're seeing that right now with the Biden economics, right? We're being so squeezed with inflation, and with the Fed raising interest rates, we saw a big step back in demand. Together, these factors work to create an aggregate supply and aggregate demand for homes, resulting in an equilibrium price and quantity. That is to say that the market forces push buyers and sellers to agree on what is considered fair market value prices for homes. Let's assume that your house is in a subdivision where the active listings and the sold homes, the houses that have been sold, have a normal distribution. A normal distribution basically means that there's enough information within the data to extract statistics, right? There's enough listed homes, there's enough sold homes that we can actually look at the data and manipulate it in such a way, or not manipulate, but extract information from it. Typically in a seller's market like we had in COVID here in Florida, you would see the actively listed homes have a higher price per square foot than the sold homes, because obviously the trajectory is that home prices are increasing. So in looking at a normal distribution, what that means is basically you take the lowest priced home and the highest priced home, as well as the averages and the means and median and mode that you can plot out on a normal distribution. They're typically going to be higher again for active homes versus sold, and then from the expireds and the actives, you'll see that spread too, right? You'll see that a bigger jump, because the expireds have expired because essentially no one wanted the house, typically because it's either really, really ugly and it needs a lot of work, or this is 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be priced way too high. Sometimes as sellers, it's difficult to remove yourself from what we call dreamland. It's the price where sellers would like to sell their homes, but they're not really sure if they're gonna get that from a buyer, right? Sometimes dreamland can take you to Never Never Land, which is where the high price homes end up at, and that is the expired listings. These are homes that wanted to sell, but the buyers basically bypassed them and they ended up choosing a more competitively priced home. I said competitively priced home. What we tend to do when we give CMA presentations is to focus on the sold homes, because this is reality. This is where market forces are forcing buyers and sellers to agree on a price. It's reality. It's not Never Never Land and it's not Dreamland. It's reality. This is where transactions are taking place. So when you're going to price your home, let's say your home is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and 2,300 square feet. And it has a 3-car garage. And you're trying to determine what price to list your home at. And let's say that there's several different homes that have sold in your neighborhood that results in a spread in prices where the lowest sold home was $410,000 and the highest price home was $625,000. Okay, so within this spread and over a period of time, let's assume that your subdivision, the homes being sold, fall into a normal distribution where we can calculate averages and means and statistical data. Let's say that the median price for homes that are similar to yours in your subdivision lands at $520,000. This is the equilibrium price where market forces, buyers and sellers are agreeing that this is the fair market value for a house like yours. All right, I don't want to lose you here, but I have to emphasize that this is super important, that you realize that people are making decisions based on the information that they have, and buyers and sellers, essentially market forces, are determining this equilibrium price based on all the information that they have, based on substitutes, based on all the aggregate demand and aggregate supply that we talked about earlier. What becomes a problem for the seller is when they look away from the data and they say, you know what, Manny or Mr. Realtor, Mrs. Realtor, I see what you're telling me, but I don't want to believe these numbers. I want to put an unjustifiable price to my home and I want to list it like that. When you do that, you essentially decrease the demand for your home. All right, I got you. You might be thinking, Manny, well, my house is worth 520, but I think that there's somebody out there that's willing to pay 700,000 for my house, or 650. And you're right. That in economics terms, that's called consumer surplus, right? There's somebody maybe who looks at your house that's coming from like New York or Cali, and they have a ton of money, and they live in a smaller house or in a condo or apartment, and they'll move down here and they'll say, listen, I'll pay more for this beautiful house. That can happen. That's called consumer surplus, and that is the amount of benefit that a consumer gets because they would have paid, we'll say 700 for your home, but you're listing it at 520. I get that. What I want to highlight though is that the possibility of that happening decreases it significantly because the demand is not going to be there, right? You're gonna see a significant drop in demand when you price it at 700,000, right? So I just want to emphasize, you're right, someone can buy it, but the chances of that happening decreases based on market knowledge, meaning people have other information to say, well, this guy is pricing his house at 700,000 and the guy next door is pricing his at fair market value at 520. That guy from California, from New York, he's not gonna just stop at your house and buy yours. He's gonna look at the 520. You get what I'm saying? So in an open market, which is where we live in here in America, like they're gonna look at other substitutes. And so that's why I emphasize that your demand is gonna decrease, okay? So if you wanna play patty cake and you wanna do that, you can.
Patty cake, baker's man.
But you take the risk of losing that demand, and we're in the camp that you want to create demand so that it helps you, not take away the demand so that it destroys you. But I want you to notice something. Look at this graph right here. Look at what happens when demand decreases because you have a high-priced home. Notice that demand drops significantly, and this is a real thing. In real estate terms, it's like no one's showing up to your open house. No one's gonna put in a request to look at your home. It's a real thing when demand is not there. So you as a seller are faced with a similar situation just like Ronald Reagan did, but instead what you're gonna battle with, instead of taxes and revenue, you're wrestling with price, or price ratio in this case, and the probability to sell and profit maximization. And so I applied the Laffer curve to you as a seller, okay? So I kind of created this just to kind of give you a representation of diminishing returns of what happens when you list the price too high. So for example, I have profit, or the probability of selling, on the y-axis, and then I have the price ratio on the x-axis. Now, please stick with me. I just want to show you. This might be boring to some of you guys, but stick with me, okay? Let's say you owe $300,000 on your house, right? You can list it at 420, and you'll definitely sell the house fast, but you won't make as much money. As we move down to the right on the x-axis, you can list the house for $500,000. You can sell the house quicker and you can make more of a profit. And then you can list it at the market value, and that's where you maximize your most profit and your probability of selling it. Now you might say, hey Manny, your graph doesn't work here because your profit at 600 should be more, right? If you owe 300,000, you list it for 600, you know, I'm going to be able to get 300,000. That's a profit. Your graph is jacked up. Well, not necessarily, because what we're saying here is the listed price, right? The listed price over the estimated market value. So what I'm trying to argue with this graph is you could list it at 600,000, right? But the chances of you selling your house for 600,000 when it's worth 520 is very, very low. So what's going to happen over time is the market is going to force you back to the 520 or even the 500 mark. You know what I'm saying? So when that happens, you actually lose money. And that's what I'm saying, is you get diminishing returns as you price the house too high, okay? A lot of times you might chase the market downward. We saw that a lot once demand took back, and now we're seeing new builders offering a bunch of incentives for new construction homes because the demand is not there. Here in Florida, we're seeing an increase in supply, and when that happens, that pushes the price down, especially if demand doesn't move. My point in showing you all these graphs is to help you reach your financial goals as you try to sell your home, with the biggest thing being having realistic expectation and understanding what the market is doing. So I hope this video was helpful for you, and if it was, do me a favor, do me a solid, give it a thumbs up, and definitely subscribe to the channel if you're seriously thinking about moving to Northeast Florida, or if you're thinking about selling a house in Northeast Florida, St. Augustine, Jacksonville. My wife and I, we would love to help you in any way that we can. God bless you and stay safe.